Hello everyone! Hi! Merry Christmas Eve! I'm not repeating that. Thank you so much for the 10 subs. Hello? You guys hear me? Hi! I missed you guys too. Hello, hello, hello. Thank you so much. I'm not repeating that. I appreciate it. We're not using my ASMR mic. Goose, thank you so much for the 10 gifted subs. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. Does the mic sound okay? Does it sound okay? I'm not using my actual ASMR mic. I'm just I gotta refresh the chat. Yeah, I'm just using my regular mic and just talking to you guys kind of softly, if that's okay. I don't know, it's a lot of setup. But welcome. Oh yeah, oh my gosh, gifted subs are on sale today, aren't they? I think it does go for gifted mobile subs as well. I think it does. So tonight I'm gonna be reading you guys some Christmas stories, some absolute classics, and we'll go through and just, relax for like an hour or so. It is gonna be a short stream because it's 2 a.m. and my little siblings usually wake up around 6 because they're so excited about Santa. I do have alerts muted just to kind of keep the comfy vibe. And I'm gonna read you guys some Christmas stories. So, to start, 'twas the night before Christmas when all through the house not a creature was stirring, not even a mouse. The stockings were hung by the chimney with care, in hopes that St. Nicholas soon would be there. The children were nestled all snug in their beds, while visions of sugar plums danced in their heads. Mama in her kerchief and I in my cap had just settled all brains for a long winter's nap. When out on the lawn there arose such a clatter, I sprang from my bed to see what was the matter. Away to the window I flew like a flash, tore open the shutters and threw up the sash. The moon on the breast of the new fallen snow gave the luster of midday to objects below. When what to my wondering eyes should appear but a miniature sleigh and 8 tiny reindeer, with a little old driver so lively and quick I knew in a moment it must be Saint Nick. More rapid than eagles as coursers they came, and whistled and shouted and called them by name. Now Dasher, now Dancer, now Prancer and Vixen, on Comet, on Cupid, on Donder and Blitzen. To the top of the porch, to the top of the wall, now dash away, dash away, dash away all. As dry leaves that before the wild hurricane fly, when they meet with an obstacle mount to the sky. So up to the housetop the coursers they flew, with a sleigh full of toys and St. Nicholas too. And then in a twinkling I heard on the roof the prancing and pawing of each little hoof. As I drew in my head and was turning around, down the chimney St. Nicholas came with a bound. He was dressed all in fur from his head to his foot, and his clothes were all covered with ashes and soot. A bundle of toys he had flung on his back, and he looked like a peddler just opening his pack. His eyes, how they twinkled, his dimples, how merry. His cheeks were like roses, his nose like a cherry. His droll little mouth was drawn up like a bow, and the beard on his chin was as white as the snow. The stump of a pipe he held tight in his teeth, and the smoke it encircled his head like a wreath. He had a broad face and a little round belly, then shook when he laughed like a bowl full of jelly. He was chubby and plump, a right jolly old elf, and I laughed when I saw him in spite of myself. A wink of his eye and a twist of his head soon gave me to know I had nothing to dread. He spoke not a word, but went straight to work, and filled all the stockings, then turned with a jerk, and laying his finger aside of his nose, and giving a nod, up the chimney he rose. He sprang to his sleigh, to his team gave a whistle, and away they all flew like the down of a thistle. But I heard him exclaim as he drove out of sight, "Happy Christmas to all, and to all a good night." I love, reading you guys bedtime stories. I know it sounds dumb, but I used to read bedtime stories to my little siblings all the time, and my mom used to read me bedtime stories all the time. So for me, this is just very comfy, and this is kind of like, I don't know, it's kind of like my little Christmas Eve tradition. Every year on Christmas Eve, I sit down on stream and I read you guys Christmas bedtime stories. It is different than the other Hexa. I don't really do a lot of ASMR streams. I really don't. I should do more, but... Alright. What do we have? I have a Mark Twain poem. I think we'll do The Little Match Girl. Alright. It was so terrible. Sid and I have the same microphone, Alpha. I just never use it. Slime, Merry Christmas. We have literally the exact same mic. Crust made it for us. It's a homemade 3DO. Alright. It was so terribly cold. Snow was falling, and it was almost dark. Evening came on, the last evening of the year. In the cold and gloom, a poor little girl, bareheaded and barefoot, was walking through the streets. Of course, when she had left her house, she'd had slippers on, but what good had they been? They were very big slippers, way too big for her, for they belonged to her mother. The little girl had lost them running across the road, where two carriages had rattled by terribly fast. One slipper she'd not been able to find again, and a boy had run off with the other, saying he could use it very well as a cradle someday when he had children of his own. And so the little girl walked on her naked feet, which were quite red and blue with the cold. In her old apron she carried several packages of matches, and she held a box of them in her hand. No one had bought any from her all day long, and no one had given her a cent. Shivering with cold and hunger, she crept along, a picture of misery, poor little girl. The snowflakes fell on her long, fair hair, which hung in pretty curls all over her neck. In all the windows, lights were shining, and there was a wonderful smell of roast goose, for it was New Year's Eve. Yes, she thought of that. In a corner formed by two houses, one of which projected further out onto the street than the other, she sat down and drew up her little feet under her. She was getting colder and colder, but she did not dare go home, for she had sold no matches, nor earned a single cent, and her father would surely beat her. Besides, it was cold at home, for they had nothing over them but a roof through which the wind whistled, even though the biggest cracks had been stuffed with straw and rags. Her hands were almost dead with cold. Oh, how much one little match might warm her. If she could only take one from the box and rub it against the wall and warm her hands. She drew one out. Ratch! How it sputtered and burned, made a warm, bright flame like a little candle as she held her hands over it. But it gave a strange light. It really seemed to the little girl as if she was sitting before a great iron stove with shining brass knobs and a brass cover. How wonderfully the fire burned. How comfortable it was. The youngster stretched out her feet to warm them too. Then the little flame went out. The stove vanished, and she had only the remains of a burnt match in her hand. She struck another match against the wall. It burned brightly, and when the light fell upon the wall, it became transparent, like a thin veil, and she could see through it into a room. On the table, a snow-white cloth was prepared, and on it stood a shining dinner service. The roast goose steamed gloriously, stuffed with apples and prunes. And what was still better, the goose jumped down from the dish and waddled along the floor with a knife and fork in its breast, right over to the little girl. Then the match went out, and she could see only the thick, cold wall. She lighted another match. Then she was sitting under the most beautiful Christmas tree. It was much larger and much more beautiful than the one she had seen last Christmas, through the glass door at the rich merchant's home. Your fish prawn, what is that? Also, Alpha, thank you so much for the $15. Head to bed, good night. Thousands of candles burned on the green branches, and colored pictures like those in the print shops looked down at her. The little girl reached both her hands toward them. Then the match went out, but the Christmas lights mounted higher. She saw them now as bright stars in the sky. One of them fell down, forming a long line of fire. Now someone is dying, thought the little girl, for her old grandmother, the only person who had ever loved her, and who was now dead, had told her that when a star fell down, a soul went up to God. She rubbed another match against the wall. It became bright again, and in the glow, the old grandmother stood clear and shining, kind and lovely. "Grandmother," cried the child, "oh, take me with you. I know you'll disappear when the match is burnt out. You'll vanish like the warm stove, the wonderful roast goose, and the big, beautiful Christmas tree." And she quickly struck the whole bundle of matches, for she wished to keep her grandmother with her, and the matches burned with such a glow that it became brighter than daylight. Grandmother had never been so grand and so beautiful. She took the little girl in her arms, and both of them flew in brightness and joy above the earth, very, very high, and up there was neither cold, nor hunger, nor fear. They were with God. But in the corner, leaning against the wall, sat the little girl with red cheeks and smiling mouth, frozen to death on the last evening of the old year. The New Year's sun rose upon a little pathetic figure. The child sat there, stiff and cold, holding the matches, of which one bundle was almost burned. She wanted to warm herself, the people said. No one imagined what beautiful things she had seen, and how happily she had gone with her old grandmother into the bright new year. Yeah, can you believe that's a Christmas story? It's so dark. Literally, child dies in the end. Awful. Yeah, a lot of like the Christmas stories are pretty dark. Alright, let me get a drink, because this is, I don't know if you guys know this, but whispering is actually harder on your voice than singing or talking, so I'll be taking drinks pretty frequently. Alright. This is Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer. 'Twas the day before Christmas, and all through the hills the reindeer were playing, enjoying the spills, off skating and coasting and climbing the willows, and hopscotch and leapfrog protected by pillows. Well, every so often they'd stop to call names at one little deer not allowed in their games. "Ha ha! Look at Rudolph. His nose is a sight. It's red as a beet, twice as big, twice as bright." Well, Rudolph just wept. What else could he do? He knew that the things they were saying were true. Where most reindeers' noses are brownish and tiny, poor Rudolph's was red, very large, and quite shiny. In daylight it dazzled, the picture shows that. At nighttime it glowed like the eyes of a cat, and putting dirt on it just made it look muddy. Oh boy, was he mad when they nicknamed him Ruddy. Although he was lonesome, he always was good, obeying his parents, as good reindeers should. That's why on this day, Rudolph almost felt playful. He hoped that from Santa, soon driving his sleigh full of presents and candies and dollies and toys for good little animals, good girls and boys, he'd get just as much, and this is what pleased him, as the happier, handsomer reindeer who teased him. So as night and a fog hid the world like a hood, he went to bed hopeful. He knew he'd been good. While way, way up north, on this same foggy night, old Santa was packing his sleigh for its flight. "This fog," he complained, "will be hard to get through." He shook his round head, and his tummy shook too. Without any stars or a moon as our compass, this extra dark night is quite likely to swamp us. To keep from collisions, we'll have to fly slow. To keep our direction, we'll have to fly low. We'll steer by the street lamps and houses tonight in order to finish before it gets light. Just think how the boys and girls' faith would be shaken if we didn't reach them before they awaken. Come Dasher, come Dancer, come Prancer and Vixen, come Comet, come Cupid, come Donner and Blitzen. Be quick with your suppers, get hitched in a hurry. You too will find fog a delay and a worry. And Santa was right, as he usually is. The fog was as thick as a soda's white fizz. Just not getting lost needed all Santa's skill, with street signs and numbers more difficult still. He tangled in treetops again and again, and barely missed hitting a tri-motored plane. He still made good speed, which with much twisting and turning, as long as the street lamps and house lights were burning. At each house, first noting the people who lived there, he'd quickly select the right presents to give there. By midnight, however, the last light had fled, for even big people had then gone to bed. Because it might wake them, a match was denied him. Oh my, how he wished for just one star to guide him. Through dark streets and houses, old Santa fared poorly. He now picked the presents more slowly, less surely. He really was worried, for what would he do if folks started waking up before he was through? The air was still foggy, the night dark and drear, when Santa arrived at the home of the deer. A ledge that he tripped on while seeking the chimney gave Santa a spill and a painfully skinned knee. The room he came down in was blacker than ink. He went for a chair and then found it, a sink. The first reindeer bedroom was so very black. He tripped on the rug and fell flat on his back, so dark that he had to move close to the bed and squint very hard at the sleeping deer's head. Before he could choose the right kind of toy, a doll for a girl or a train for a boy. But all this took time and filled Santa with gloom, while slowly he groped towards the next reindeer's room. The door he'd just opened when, to his surprise, a dim but quite definite light met his eyes. The lamp wasn't burning, the glow came instead from something that lay at the head of the bed. And there lay, but wait now, what would you suppose? The glowing, you guessed it, was Rudolph's red nose. So this room was easy, this one little light let Santa pick quickly the gifts that were right. How happy he was till he went out the door. The rest of the house was as black as before, so black that it made every step a dark mystery. And then came the greatest idea in all history. He went back to Rudolph and started to shake him, of course very gently, in order to wake him. And Rudolph could scarcely believe his own eyes. You can just imagine his joy and surprise at seeing who stood there so real and so near, while telling the tale we've already told here. Poor Santa's sad tale of distress and delay the fog and the darkness and losing the way, the horrible fear that some children might waken before his complete Christmas trip had been taken. And you, he told Rudolph, may yet save the day. Your wonderful forehead may yet pave the way. For what a wonderful triumph it actually might. Old Santa, you notice, was extra polite to Rudolph regarding his wonderful forehead. To call it a big shiny nose would sound horrid. I need you, said Santa, to help me tonight, to lead all my dear on the rest of our flight. And Rudolph broke out into such a big grin, it almost connected his ears and his chin. A note for his folks, he dashed off in a hurry. I've gone to help Santa, he wrote, do not worry. Said Santa, my sleigh, I'll bring it down into the lawn. You'd stick in the chimney, and flash, he was gone. So Rudolph pranced out through the door very gay, and took his proud place at the head of the sleigh. The rest of the night, well, what would you guess? Old Santa's idea was a brilliant success. And brilliant was almost no word for the way that Rudolph directed the deer in the sleigh. In spite of the fog, they flew quickly and low, and made such good use of the wonderful glow. From Rudolph's forehead, at each intersection, they did not even once lose their direction. While as for the houses and streets with a sign on them, they merely flew close so that Rudolph could shine on them. To tell who lived where and just what to give whom, they'd fly by each window and peek in the room. Old Santa knew always which children were good, and minded their parents and ate as they should. So Santa selected the gift that was right, while Rudolph's forehead gave out just enough light. It all went so fast that before it was day, the very last present was given away. The very last stocking was filled to the top, just as the sun was preparing to pop. The sun woke the reindeer in Rudolph's hometown. They found the short message that he'd written down, and gathered outside to await his return. And were they excited, astonished to learn that Rudolph, the ugliest deer of them all, Rudolph the Red-Nosed, bashful and small, the funny-faced fellow they'd always called names, and practically never allowed in their games, was now to be envied by all far and near, for no greater honor can come to a deer than riding with Santa and guiding his sleigh, the #1 job on the #1 day. The sleigh and its reindeer soon came into view, and Rudolph still led them as downward they flew. Oh boy, was he proud as they came to a landing, right where his handsomer playmates were standing. These bad deer, who used to do nothing but tease him, would now have done anything only to please him. They felt even sorrier they had been bad when Santa said, Rudolph, I never have had a deer quite so brave or so brilliant as you at fighting black fog and at guiding me through. By you, last night's journey was actually bossed. Without you, I'm certain we'd all have been lost. I hope you'll continue to keep us from grief on future dark trips as Commander-in-Chief. But Rudolph just blushed from his head to his toes until his whole fur was as red as his nose. The crowd first applauded, then started to screech, Hooray for our Rudolph, and we want a speech. But Rudolph was bashful despite being a hero, and tired, his sleep on the trip totaled 0. So that's why his speech was just brief and not bright. Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. And that's why, whenever it's foggy and gray, it's Rudolph the Red-Nosed who guides Santa's sleigh. Be listening this Christmas, but don't make a peep, 'cause that late at night children should be asleep. The very first sound that you'll hear on the roof will be little Rudolph's tiny black hoof. And soon after that, if you're still as a mouse, you may hear a swish as he flies round the house and gives enough light to give Santa a view of you and your room. And when they're all through, you may hear them call as they drive out of sight, Merry Christmas to all, and to all a good night. Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer is so good. Where's the dentist elf subplot? It was not the Island of Misfit Toys. It's not the Island of Misfit Toys. Although I do love that movie. I also like the animated Jack Frost movie. Why are you sobbing, Goose? Why are you sobbing? Can you guys tell that I'm reading to you guys like you guys are like my little siblings? This is how I read to them. Oh, we could do Frosty the Snowman. Yeah. Alright. It's snowing! Come look, Matt! Cried Jenny. It's coming down so fast I can hardly see it across the street. Matt ran to the window. Jenny was right. The snow was covering everything in sight. He could hardly wait to go outside to play in the snow. He was sure all of his friends would be at the park. Matt and Jenny ran to find their snow boots. I want to come too, said Mariana. She always wanted to go wherever they went. No, said Matt. You're too little to go to the park with us. Maybe later. Jenny and Matt hurried to put on hats, mittens, and scarves. They called goodbye to their mother and raced out the door. Lisa, Tracy, and Paul were already at the park by the time Matt and Jenny got there. Isn't this the greatest? Said Tracy. The snow's so deep. Let's build a snowman, said Paul. A huge snowman, as tall as we can make him. They got to work. It wasn't easy. They had to roll one great big snowball for his body, another for his chest, and then the smallest one for his head. Then Jenny said, he needs a face and some clothes. Everyone ran home to see what they could find. Lisa found some bright black pieces of coal for his eyes and a button for his nose. Tracy borrowed her big brother's purple scarf, and Paul brought the toy corncob pipe from his Halloween costume. Matt and Jenny found an old pair of boots. Then they saw Mariana playing with the best thing of all. She had helped her mother clean out the attic and had found a black silk top hat perfect for their snowman. Mariana, you can bring the hat for our snowman, said Jenny. It will help dress him up. When they all arrived back at the park, Lisa put the button nose and coal eyes on the snowman's face. Tracy wrapped the purple scarf around his neck, and Paul stuck the corncob pipe in his mouth. Everyone cheered as Paul and Jenny put the hat on their snowman's head. What shall we name him? Asked Tracy. How about Frosty? Suggested Jenny. Yes, they all cheered. The children began to dance in a circle around Frosty. Then little Mariana said, I wish Frosty were alive so he could play with us. Just then, Matt looked up at Frosty's face. Oh my, he cried. Frosty just winked at me. They all looked just in time to see a Frosty smile. He really was alive. Hooray, they all cheered. Then they gave the snowman a big, big hug. Frosty began to laugh. Hey, I'm ticklish, he said. Let go. They all laughed and Frosty began to do a little dance. The children stepped in line behind him. Suddenly, there was a grand parade going all around the park with Frosty leading the way. After they had paraded around the park, Frosty said, Gee, this is fun. What else can we do? Paul answered, Let's go sledding. They pulled their sleds to the top of the hill and got ready to have a race. Oh no, said Matt. What are we going to do now? Frosty's too big to fit on any of our sleds. Don't worry about that, laughed Frosty. Remember, I'm made of snow. All I have to do is lie down and slide. Watch. Frosty was right. He could slide as fast as the fastest sled just by lying on his back. What a race they all had. That night, Jenny, Matt, and Mariana could hardly wait to tell their parents about Frosty. A snowman who talks, dances, and sleds, said his father. Well, I'm afraid that's something I'd have to see to believe. But Frosty is a very special snowman, said Matt, and tomorrow we want to take him ice skating. Maybe borrow your skates? Sure, said his father. Since he's made of snow, I guess he won't get hurt if he takes a spill or two. Early the next morning, the children ran to find Frosty. Wait until you try ice skating, said Lisa. It's even more fun than sledding. When Frosty saw all the skaters on the pond, he said, I don't know. That kind of looks hard. Frosty bravely put on his skates and started off slowly. Hey, this isn't so hard, he called. You were right, this is fun. He learned to skate and figure eight, and even to lift a foot high in the air as he skated. Whee! He shouted, tipping his top hat as he whizzed by the kids. After a while, the children began to get cold. Come on, Frosty, said Tracy. Let's go into the warming house and warm up. My hands are freezing. They stepped into the little warming hut. His hands and feet began to warm up, but they had forgotten something very important. Frosty was made of snow. Whew, this place doesn't feel so good to me, he said. I'll wait outside. Frosty waited for his friends outside. As he watched the other skaters, he noticed one little boy who was skating very near a sign that says Danger, Thin Ice. Hey, watch out, called Frosty, but the little boy did not hear. He was skating right towards it. Quick as a wink, Frosty darted out onto the ice after the little boy. Just as the ice started to crack, Frosty caught him by the hand and pulled the boy to safety. Frosty was a hero. Everyone cheered. Weren't you scared? Asked Jenny. What if you'd fallen through the ice? Frosty smiled and said, You forgot. I'm made of snow. A little cold doesn't bother me. The next morning, Jenny looked out the window. Oh no, she said. It's raining. What would happen to Frosty? Matt said he thought maybe the rain would stop soon. But the rain did not stop. It rained all that day. The children watched and worried about their friend Frosty. Finally, the next morning, the rain stopped and the sun came out. Let's go to the park and see how Frosty is, said Matt. Come with us, Dad. When they got to the park, they looked all around. They didn't see Frosty anywhere. Finally, Jenny called out, Look over there. I see Frosty's hat by the tree. But there was only a little lump of snow next to the hat. Frosty was gone. They all stood looking at the hat and the little pile of snow. Mariana picked up the hat sadly, and then their father smiled. Look, he said, there, under Frosty's hat. He left a promise that he'll be back next year. And sure enough, there it was. A little flower, just the color of Frosty's purple scarf, had pushed up through the snow. It almost seemed to smile and say, See you next year. Cute. That one was cute. That was really cute. What is my favorite Christmas movie? Honestly, any of the old animated claymation Christmas movies, they're all very nostalgic for me. My voice is so comforting. Thank you, I appreciate it. Alright, chat, now we have I think we have a crowd favorite here. Are you ready? Let me take a drink. Thank you. I don't really do a lot of ASMR. I mainly play games, but if you guys like ASMR, maybe I'll look at doing it more. I get bored. Did you guys hear me swallow? Alright. I think this one will be a crowd favorite. This is How the Grinch Stole Christmas. Every Who down in Whoville liked Christmas a lot, but the Grinch, who lived just north of Whoville, did not. The Grinch hated Christmas, the whole Christmas season. Now please don't ask why, no one quite knows the reason. It could be his head just wasn't screwed on right. It could be, perhaps, that his shoes were too tight. But I think the most likely reason of all may have been that his heart was 2 sizes too small. But whatever the reason, his heart or his shoes, he stood there on Christmas Eve hating the Whos, staring down from his cave with a sour, grinchy frown at the warm lighted windows below in their town, for he knew every Who down in Whoville beneath was busy now hanging a mistletoe wreath. And they're hanging their stockings, he snarled with a sneer. Tomorrow is Christmas, it's practically here. Then he growled with his Grinch fingers, nervously drumming. I must find some way to stop Christmas from coming. For tomorrow, he knew, all the Who girls and boys would wake bright and early. They'd rush for their toys, and then, oh, the noise! The noise, 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 noise. That's the one thing he hated. The noise, 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 noise. Then the Whos, young and old, would sit down to a feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, and they'd feast, 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 feast. They would feast on Who pudding and rare Who roast beef, which was something the Grinch couldn't stand in the least. Moonshadow, thank you so much for this, big head, no goat. And then they'd do something he liked least of all. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, would stand close together with Christmas bells ringing. They'd stand hand in hand, and the Whos would start singing. They'd sing, and they'd sing, and they'd sing, 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 sing. And the more the Grinch thought of this Who Christmas song, the more the Grinch thought, I must stop this whole thing. Why, for 53 years I've put up with it now. I must stop this Christmas from coming. But how? Then he got an idea. An awful idea. The Grinch got a wonderful, awful idea. I know just what to do, the Grinch laughed in his throat, and he made a quick Santa Claus hat and a coat. And he chuckled and clucked, what a great Grinchy trick. With this coat and this hat, I look just like Saint Nick. All I need is a reindeer. The Grinch looked around, but since reindeers scarce, there were none to be found. Did that stop the old Grinch? No. The Grinch simply said, if I can't find a reindeer, I'll make one instead. So he called his dog Max, then he took some red thread, and he tied a big horn on the top of his head. Then he loaded some bags and some old empty sacks on a ramshackle sleigh, and he hitched up old Max. Then the Grinch said, get up, and the sleigh started down towards the homes where the Who lay a snooze in their town. All their windows were dark, quiet snow filled the air. All the Whos were all dreaming sweet dreams without care. When he came to the first little house on the square, this is stop number 1, the old Grinchy Claus hissed, and he climbed to the roof, empty bags in his fist. Then he slid down the chimney, a rather tight pinch, but if Santa could do it, then so could the Grinch. He got stuck only once, for a moment or two, then he stuck his head out of the fireplace flue, where the little Who stockings all hung in a row. These stockings, he grinned, are the first things to go. Then he slithered and slunk, with a smile most unpleasant, around the whole room, and he took every present: pop guns and bicycles, roller snakes, drums, checkerboards and tricycles, popcorn and plums. And he stuffed them in bag. Then the Grinch, very nimbly, stuffed all of the bags, one by one, up the chimney. Then he slunk to the icebox, and he took the Who's feast. He took the Who pudding, he took the roast beast. He cleaned out the icebox as quick as a flash. Why, that Grinch even took their last can of Who hash. Then he stuffed all the food up the chimney with glee. And now, grinned the Grinch, I will stuff up the tree. And the Grinch grabbed the tree and he started to shove, when he heard a small sound like the coo of a dove. He turned around fast and he saw a small Who, little Cindy Lou Who was not more than 2. The Grinch had been caught by this tiny Who daughter, who'd got out of bed for a cup of cold water. She stared at the Grinch and said, "Santa Claus, why? Why are you taking our Christmas tree? Why?" But you know that old Grinch was so smart and so slick. He thought up a lie, and he thought it up quick. "Why, my sweet little Tor," the fake Santa Claus lied, "there's a light on this tree that won't light on one side, so I'm taking it home to my workshop, my dear. I'll fix it up there, then I'll bring it back here." And his fib fooled the child. Then he patted her head, and he got her a drink, and he sent her to bed. When Cindy Lou Who went to bed with her cup, he went to the chimney and stuffed the tree up. Then the last thing he took was the log for their fire. Then he went up the chimney himself, the old liar. On the walls he left nothing but hooks and some wire, and the one speck of food that he left in the house was a crumb that was even too small for a mouse. Then he did the same thing to the other Who's house, leaving crumbs much too small for the other Who's mouses. It was 1/4 dawn, all the Who's still abed, all the Who's still a snooze, when he packed up his sled. Packed it up with their presents, the ribbons, the wrappings, the tags and the tinsels, the trimmings and trappings. 3,000 feet up the side of Mount Crumpet, he rode with his load to the tip-top to dump it. Pooh, pooh to the Who's, he was grinchishly humming. They're finding out now that no Christmas is coming. They're just waking up, I know just what they'll do. Their mouths will hang open a minute or two, and the Who's down in Whoville will all cry boo-hoo. "That's a noise," grinned the Grinch, "I simply must hear." So he paused, and the Grinch put his hand to his ear, and he did hear a sound rising over the snow. It started in low, then started to grow. But the sound wasn't sad. Why, this sound sounded merry. It couldn't be so, but it was merry, very. He stared down at Whoville. The Grinch popped his eyes, and he shook. What he saw was a shocking surprise. Every Who down in Whoville, the tall and the small, was singing, without any presents at all. He hadn't stopped Christmas from coming. It came. Somehow or another, it came just the same. And the Grinch, with his Grinch feet ice cold in the snow, stood puzzling and puzzling. How could it be so? It came without ribbons. It came without rags. It came without packages, boxes, or bags. And he puzzled 3 hours till his puzzler was sore. Then the Grinch thought of something he hadn't before. Maybe Christmas, he thought, doesn't come from a store. Maybe Christmas, perhaps, means a little bit more. And what happened then? Well, in Whoville, they say that the Grinch's small heart grew 3 sizes that day. And the minute his heart didn't feel quite so tight, he whizzed with his load through the bright morning light, and he brought back the toys and the food for the feast. And he himself, the Grinch, carved the roast beast. The end. Welcome in. Thank you guys for all the follows. Welcome. The Grinch is such like a classic story. It really is. I'm trying to think what we can read next. Yes, it is really called Roast Beast, but in real life we call it roast beef. I'm getting sleepy. This is definitely going to be a shorter stream tonight, guys. Onion eating ASMR? What? What? What do you mean onion eating ASMR? What do you mean by that? Does anybody have any Christmas story requests? Does anybody have any Christmas story requests? Merry Christmas. We did do 'Twas the Night Before Christmas. That was the first one we did. The Christmas story. We could do the Nutcracker. The Nutcracker's just really long. I don't know if we'd be able to finish it. It's super long. It's like 14 fucking chapters. It's like 14 chapters. That's so long. The Christmas story is also super long. Why is it so long? Why is everything so long? Why? The fir tree. Let's see. Yeah, we could probably do this one. It's a little long, but it's not super long. We could do the fir tree. Yeah, A Christmas Story is a full-on book, and so is the Nutcracker. We'll do the fir tree. Alright. I'm gonna get it pulled up. Dun-dun! One sec, guys. Sorry about that, guys. We're doing ASMR, so normally I don't mind when people are like going in and out of my room, We can't do that for ASMR. Because my door is so squeaky, it's so loud. I don't think we ever did decide what the Christmas Day stream will be. How about you guys decide while I read this? Once upon a time, out in the woods, stood a nice little fir tree. The place he had was a very good one. The sun shone on him. As to fresh air, there was enough of that. And round him grew many large-sized comrades, pines as well as firs. But the little fir wanted so very much to be a grown-up tree. He did not think of the warm sun and of the fresh air. He did not care for the little cottage children that ran about and prattled when they were in the woods looking for wild strawberries. The children often came with a whole pitcher full of berries, or a long row of them threaded on a straw, and sat down near the young tree and said, "Oh, how pretty he is! What a nice little fir!" But this was what the tree could not bear to hear. At the end of a year, he had shot up a good deal, and after another year, he was another long bit taller. For with fir trees, one can always tell by the shoots how many years old they are. "Oh, were I but such a high tree as the others are," sighed he. "Then I should be able to spread out my branches, and with the tops to look into the wide world. Then would the birds build nests among my branches, and when there was a breeze, I could bend with as much stateliness as the others. Neither the sunbeams, nor the birds, nor the red clouds, which morning and evening sailed above him, gave the little tree any pleasure. In winter, when the snow lay glittering on the ground, a hare would often come leaping along and jump right over the little tree. Oh, that made him so angry. But 2 winters were past, and in the third, the tree was so large that the hare was obliged to go around it. To grow and grow, to get older and be tall, thought the tree. That, after all, is the most delightful thing in the world. In autumn, the woodcutters always came and felled some of the largest trees. This happened every year, and the young fir tree, that had now grown to a very comely size, trembled at the sight. For the magnificent great trees fell to earth with noise and cracking. The branches were lopped off, and the trees looked long and bare. They were hardly to be recognized, and then they were laid out in carts, and the horses dragged them out of the wood. Where did they go to? What became of them? In spring, when the swallows and the storks came, the tree asked them, "Don't you know where they've been taken? Have you not met them anywhere?" The swallows did not know anything about it, but the stork looked musing, nodded his head, and said, "Yes, I think I know. I met many ships as I was flying hither from Egypt. On the ships were magnificent masts, and I venture to assert that it was they that smelt so of fir. I may congratulate you, for they lifted themselves on high most majestically. Oh, were I but old enough to fly across the sea. But how does the sea look in reality? What's it like?" "That would take a long time to explain," said the stork, and with these words off he went. "Rejoice in thy growth," said the sunbeams. "Rejoice in thy vigorous growth, and in the fresh life that moveth within thee." And the wind kissed the tree, and the dew wept tears over him, but the fir understood it not. When Christmas came, quite young trees were cut down, trees which often were not even as large or of the same age as this fir tree, who could never rest, but always wanted to be off. These young trees, and they were always the finest looking, retained their branches. They were laid on carts, and the horses drew them out of the wood. "Where are they going to?" asked the fir. "They're not taller than I. There was one indeed that was considerably shorter. And why do they retain all their branches? Whither are they taken?" We know," chirped the sparrows. "We've peeped in at the windows in the town below. We know whither they are taken. The greatest splendor and the greatest magnificence one can imagine awaits them. We peeped through the windows and saw them planted in the middle of a warm room and ornamented with the most splendid things, with gilded apples, with gingerbread, with toys, and many hundred lights. And then, asked the fir tree, trembling in every bough. And then? What happens then? We did not see anything more. It was incomparably beautiful. Hang on one sec. Thank you. Sorry. I need a drink. This is why I don't do ASMR. My throat's already starting to hurt. I would fain know if I am destined for so glorious a career, cried the tree, rejoicing. But that is still better than to cross the sea. What a longing do I suffer, for Christmas but come. I am now tall, and my branches spread like the others that were carried off last year. Oh, were I but already on the cart, were I in the warm room with all the splendor and magnificence. Yes, then something better, something still grander will surely follow, or wherefore should they thus ornament me? Something better, something still grander must follow. But what? Oh, how I long, how I suffer. I do not know myself. What is the matter with me? Rejoice in our presence, said the air and the sunlight. Rejoice in thy own fresh youth. But the tree did not rejoice at all. He grew and was green both winter and summer. People that saw him said, "What a fine tree." And towards Christmas, he was one of the first that was cut down. The axe struck deep into the very pith. The tree fell to the earth with a sigh. He felt a pang. It was like a swoon. He could not think of happiness, for he was sorrowful at being separated from his home, from the place where he had sprung up. He well knew that he should never see his dear old comrades, the little bushes and flowers among him, any more. Perhaps not even the birds. The departure was not at all agreeable. The tree only came to himself when he was unloaded in a courtyard with the other trees, and heard a man say, "That one is splendid. We don't want the others." Then 2 servants came in rich livery and carried the fir tree into a large and splendid drawing room. Portraits were hanging on the walls, and near the porcelain stove stood 2 large Chinese vases with lions on the covers. There, too, were large easy chairs, silken sofas, large tables full of picture books and full of toys, worth hundreds and hundreds of crowns. At least the children said so. And the fir tree was stuck upright in a cask that was filled with sand. But no one could see it was a cask, for green cloth was hung all round it, and it stood on a large gaily covered carpet. Oh, how the tree quivered! What was to happen? The servants, as well as the young ladies, decorated it. On one branch there hung little nets cut out of colored paper, and each net was filled with sugar plums, and among the other boughs gilded apples and walnuts were suspended, looking as though they had grown there, and little blue and white tapers were placed among the leaves. Dolls that looked for all the world like men. The tree had never beheld such before, were seen among the foliage, and at the very top a large star of gold tinsel was fixed. It was really splendid, beyond description splendid. This evening, they all said, how it will shine this evening. Oh, thought the tree, if the evening were but come, if the tapers were but lighted, and then I wonder what will happen. Perhaps the other trees from the forest will come to look at me. Perhaps the sparrows will beat against the window panes. I wonder if I should take root here, and winter and summer stand covered with ornaments. He knew very much about the matter, but he was so impatient for that sheer longing he got a pain in his back, and this with trees is the same thing as a headache for us. The candles were now lighted. What brightness, what splendor! The tree trembled so in every bough that one of the tapers set fire to the foliage. It blazed up famously. "Help! Help!" cried the young ladies, and they quickly put out the fire. Now the tree did not even dare tremble. What a state he was in! He was so uneasy lest he lose something of his splendor, and he was quite bewildered amidst the glare and brightness. And suddenly both folding doors opened, and a troop of children rushed in as if they would upset the tree. The older persons followed quietly. The little ones stood quite still. But it was only for a moment. Then they shouted that the whole place re-echoed with their rejoicing. They danced round the tree, and one present after the other was pulled off. "What are they about?" thought the tree. "What is to happen now?" And the lights burned down to the very branches, and as they burned down they were put out, one after the other, and then the children had permission to plunder the tree. So they fell upon it with such violence that all its branches cracked. If it had not been fixed firmly in the ground, it certainly would have tumbled down. The children danced about with their beautiful playthings. No one looked at the tree except for the old nurse, who peeped between the branches, but it was only to see if there was a fig or an apple left that had been forgotten. A story, cried the children, drawing the little fat man towards the tree. He seated himself under it and said, "Now we are in the shade, and the tree can listen too. But I shall only tell one story. Now which will you have? That about Ivedy-Avedy, or about Humpty Dumpty, who tumbled downstairs, and yet after all came to the throne and married the princess?" The children clapped and shouted too. "Tell us another one, tell us another one," for they wanted to hear about Ivedy-Avedy too. But after Humpty Dumpty, the storytelling stopped. The fir tree stood very still as it pondered how the birds in the woods had never told a story equal to this. Humpty Dumpty tumbled downstairs, yet he married the princess. Imagine! That must be how things happen in the world. You can never tell. Maybe I'll tumble downstairs and marry a princess too, thought the fir tree, who believed every word of the story because such a nice man had told it. The tree looked forward to the following day, when they would deck it again with fruit and toys, candies and gold. "Tomorrow I shall not quiver," it decided. "I'll enjoy my splendor to the full. Tomorrow I shall hear about Humpty Dumpty again, and perhaps about Ivedy-Avedy too." All night long the tree stood silent as it dreamed its dreams, and the next morning the butler and the maid came in with their dusters. "Now my splendor will be renewed," the fir tree thought, but they dragged it upstairs to the garret, and there they left it in a dark corner where no daylight ever came. "What's the meaning of this?" the tree wondered. "What am I going to do here? What stories shall I hear?" It leaned against the wall, lost in dreams. It had plenty of time for dreaming as the days and nights went by. Nobody came to the garret, and when at last someone did come, it was only to put many big boxes away in the corner. The tree was quite hidden. One might think it had been entirely forgotten. "It's still winter outside," the tree thought. "The earth is too hard and covered with snow for them to plant me now. I must have been put here for shelter until springtime comes. How thoughtful of them, how good people are. Only I wish it weren't so dark here, and so very, very lonely. There's not even a little hare. It was so friendly out in the woods when the snow was on the ground and the hare came hopping along. Yes, he was friendly even when he jumped right over me, though I didn't think so then. Here, it's all so terribly lonely. Squeak, squeak, said a little mouse just then. He crept across the floor, and another one followed him. They sniffed the fir tree and rustled in and out among its branches. "It is fearfully cold," one of them said. "Except for that, it would be very nice here, wouldn't it, you old fir tree?" "I'm not at all old," said the fir tree. "Many trees are much older than I am." "Where did you come from?" the mice asked him. "And what do you know?" They were most inquisitive creatures. "Tell us about the most beautiful place in the world. Have you been there? Were you ever in the larder where there are cheeses on the shelves and hams that hang from the rafters? It's the place where you can dance upon tallow candles, where you can dart in thin and squeeze out fat." "I know nothing of that place," said the tree, "but I know the woods where the sun shines and the little bird sings." Then it told him about its youth. The little mice had never heard the likes of it. They listened very intently and said, "My, how much you've seen, and how happy it must have made you." "Aye," the fir tree thought about it. Yes, those days were rather amusing. And he went on to tell them about Christmas Eve when it was decked out in candles and candies. The Opera GX mod page. Huh? Do I have an Opera GX mod? Huh? Wait, what? Do I have one? What? What? Welcome in. Also, could you send me a link to that? I didn't know that. Maybe. Welcome in, Foxcode. "Oh," said the little mice. "How lucky you've been, you old fir tree." "I'm not at all old," it insisted. "I came out of the woods just this winter, and I'm really in the prime of life, though at the moment my growth is suspended." "How nicely you tell things," said the mice. The next night they came with 4 other mice to hear what the tree had to say. The more it talked, the more clearly it recalled things, and it thought, those were happy times. But they may still come back. They may still come back again. Humpty Dumpty fell downstairs, and yet he married the princess. Maybe the same thing will happen to me. It thought about a charming little birch tree that grew out in the woods. To the fir tree, she was a real and lovely princess. "Who is Humpty Dumpty?" the mice asked it. So the fir tree told them the whole story, for it could remember it word by word. The little mice were ready to jump on top of the tree for joy. The next night, many more mice came to see the fir tree, and on Sunday, 2 rats paid it a call, but they said that the story was not very amusing. This made the little mice so sad that they began to find it not so very interesting either. "Is that the only story you know?" the rats asked. "Only that one," the tree answered. "I heard it on the happiest evening of my life, but I did not know then how happy I was." "It's a very silly story. Don't you know one that tells about bacon and candles? Can't you tell us a good larder story?" "No," said the tree. "Then goodbye, and we won't be back," the rat said, and went away. Oh crap, I lost it. 1 second. Good night, Slime. I'm sorry you have to work on Christmas. Okay. At last, the little mice took to staying away too. The tree sighed. "Oh, wasn't it pleasant when those gay little mice sat around and listened to all that I had to say?" Now that too is past and gone, but I will take good care to enjoy myself once they let me out of here. When would that be? Well, it came to pass on a morning when people came to clean out the garret. The boxes were moved, the tree was pulled out and thrown hard on the floor. But a servant dragged it all at once to a stairway where there was daylight again. Now my life will start all over, the tree thought. It felt the fresh air and the first sunbeam strike as if it came out into the courtyard. This all happened so quickly. There was so much going around it, that the tree forgot to even give a glance at itself. The courtyard joined a garden where the flowers were blooming. Great masses of fragrant roses hung over the picket fence. The linden trees were in blossom, and between them the swallows skimmed past, calling, "Tira-lira-lee, my love's come back to me." But it was not the fir tree whom they spoke of. "Now I shall live again," it rejoiced, and tried to stretch out its branches. Alas, they were withered and brown and brittle. It was tossed into a corner among weeds and nettles, but the gold star that was still tied to its top sparkled bravely in the sunlight. Several of the merry children who had danced around the tree and taken such pleasure in it at Christmas were playing in the courtyard. One of the youngest children seized upon it and tore off the tinsel star. "Look what is still hanging on that ugly old Christmas tree," the child said, and stamped upon the branches until they cracked beneath his shoes. The tree saw the beautiful flowers blooming freshly in the garden. It saw itself and wished that they had left it in the darkest corner of the garret. It thought of its own young days in the deep woods, and of the merry Christmas Eve, and of the little mice who had been so pleased when it told them the story of Humpty Dumpty. "My days are over and past," said the poor tree. "Why didn't I enjoy them while I could? Now they're gone, all gone." A servant came and chopped the tree into little pieces. These heaped together quite high, the wood blazed beautifully under a big copper kettle, and the fir tree moaned so deeply that each groan sounded like a muffled shot. That's why the children who were playing nearby ran to make a circle around the flames, staring into the fire and crying "Piff! Paff!" But as each groan burst from it, the tree thought of a bright summer day in the woods, or a starlit winter night. It thought of Christmas Eve and thought of Humpty Dumpty, which was the only story it ever heard and knew how to tell. And so the tree was burned completely away. The children played on in the courtyard. The youngest child wore on his breast the gold star that had topped the tree on its happiest night of all. But that was no more, and the tree was no more, and there's no more to my story. No more, nothing more. All stories come to an end. That story's so sad. So, I'm going to go to bed. Yes. Okay, I have to go to bed, but I'm going to send you guys to another ASMR channel. Do you guys have a preference on who I send you to? Do you guys have a preference on who I send you to? I'm trying to listen to other creators and see what they're doing. I'm trying to see, I'm trying to see. Sid is not live. Pearl is live, and I have sent people to her before when I did ASMR. I don't really know. I'm gonna send you guys to Pearl. Bending silver spoons. I don't even see that person live. Am I crazy? Oh my gosh, Joe! What? Thank you so much for the $100. What? Merry Christmas to you too. Merry Christmas to you too. Thank you so much. I appreciate that so much. Thank you. Wow. Alright, I'm gonna send you guys over to Pearl. And let me get a raid message going. Alright, here's our raid message. You guys have an absolutely wonderful night. Thank you so much for spending tonight with me. I will see you tomorrow for Christmas. I will see you tomorrow for Christmas. I love you all so much. I'm sending you to another ASMR channel because we've been doing ASMR all night, and I don't want to send you guys to somebody who's streaming a game and is being loud, because I know we probably have some people trying to sleep. So I am sending you guys to another ASMR channel. Which I don't normally get to do, actually. So I'm pretty pleased with this. Pretty pleased. But thank you guys so much for hanging out with me. Have a wonderful night and a very Merry Christmas. And I will see you all tomorrow. Goodbye. Goodbye, goodbye. Mwah, mwah, mwah.